6, 7, 8. Hello,
Good afternoon, good morning.
and welcome to the Smart and Public podcast. I'm Katie Boyson,
And I'm the
and
other
Matt.
Katie, Katie Duffy.
Can you tell that this is our first episode?
It's all right,
We're very
episode one,
giggly, we're a little bit awkward, and we're going full force with this.
which is basically a good intro for us. A little bit giggly, a little bit awkward.
Just running full steam into the bushes. So maybe we'll start with the podcast. This is our very first episode, as we mentioned, but let's start with a couple of introductions, who we are. Duffy, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay, so I'm Katie Duffy, the Australian one. Based in Sydney, I have worked in PR for probably almost 20 years, maybe not quite 20 years, but around that number. Always in tech, B2B, B2C, grew up in agency, I like to say. So started my career in small agencies, moved to a bigger agency, and then got the knock on the door for an in-house role at a big tech company and had been there 11 and a half years, so part of the furniture. And as of literally last month, my role was eliminated. So now I am gainfully unemployed and have the time to do a podcast. From a personal perspective, I'm a mum. I have 4 children. I know, I don't look old enough. One of them is my stepdaughter, so she's 18 and off living her life. And then I have 3 little ones, a 4-year-old boy, and lucky us, we were blessed with identical twin girls about 18 months ago. So it's a busy life and a busy household. That's me.
I love telling people about the story of the twin surprise doctor visit.
Oh,
it's
the
one of my favorite
ultrasound?
things to share.
Yes. That is a fun anecdote we can share at some point of when we
Yeah,
have it
we'll
up.
share that another time. Get to know us first. How about that,
Yeah,
everybody?
before I start
Yeah.
talking about my uterus. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I'm Katie Boyson. I've also been in comms for almost 20 years. I started out in San Francisco, working at a PR agency, working for companies like Facebook and EMC and Yahoo, and then went into my first in-house role probably about 3 years in. So I was kind of like agency born and then went in-house to more consumer tech companies. Did a stint in retail at a company called Nasty Gal. That was really fun. And then spent the next 10 years of my life at a bigger tech company, a Fortune 500 company that brought me down to Australia, which is how I met Katie Duffy, and she was my boss at that company.
Boss slash friend slash mother hen for when you
Yeah.
didn't know how to do things in Australia.
I'm sure that everyone can relate to this, but Duffy is the person where if things are really frustrating or you're having a really hard time at work, you're kind of like, Mom,
Yeah.
Mom, fix it.
Yeah, and I couldn't always fix it, but I also helped Katie a lot with her pronunciation of Australian words, because she has that beautiful American accent that sometimes just didn't quite work with some of our words. So yeah, we had a great time, and then you
I
left
know.
me.
I know. And now I'm back. I'm basing in Bend, Oregon. So I run a consulting business now where I help companies kind of get off the ground from a startup standpoint, or I jump in and work as a fractional leader for larger scale companies. So
She's killing it.
I'm having fun. I don't know if I'm necessarily killing it, but it's definitely fun.
Nice.
So let's go into a little bit of housekeeping. By the way, this episode is going to be getting to know us, getting the lay of the land. If you don't like that kind of thing, come back for episode 2.
Yeah.
But we're gonna,
Five.
you know what? I think it's gonna be fun, and we're gonna have fun along the way. So maybe let's just kind of start with, we've got this name Smart and Public for our podcast. Let's talk a little bit why we named it that. Because I think it's pretty random. It's pretty broad. It doesn't really speak to PR and comms, right? But I do think it does in the sense that, and you'll probably agree with me, Duffy, but PR people are a different kind of breed,
Oh yes.
right?
Yeah.
We're type A. We are very detail oriented, perfectionist types. And I think that what that leads to is a lot of people end up consuming their brain with work and the timeliness of everything. And they really end up using all of their brain power for work. And
Yeah.
that leads you to miss out on minor details of your life, like life admin, getting your wet laundry out of the washer,
Exactly.
and other things.
I think
Do
as
you
well,
have
it's like I like to think of PR people as extroverted introverts, right? Like somehow at work we're like on the ball and we know what we're doing and we feel confident telling a CEO, what they need to be doing from a comms perspective. But then we get home and it's like, I don't know how to stack a dishwasher. And I don't know how to do math. I'm a language person. I love words. I love writing, but like give me an IKEA set and I don't know how it goes together. I just don't. So we kind of had this like idea of part of our role is to help people be smart in public. Like that's part of our comms role is like, how can we make this sound better? How can we tweak it so that it really aligns with our messaging? So it's kind of that idea of smart in public, but also deep down, we feel like we're much smarter in public and at home there's some things that we just don't quite do right. Maybe that's just us. I don't know. So that's why we call it that. That's what we thought. And we threw out a whole bunch of names. There were some good ones, but we just thought it was a good one to kind of capture who we think we are deep down.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it's interesting when you're just talking about kind of CEO. We have more of a role to speak up to them, look intelligent in front of them. We're advising them on their comms, what to say externally. I think that kind of leads to something that I want to talk a little bit about of like PR people see a lot of shit. Like we see where the bodies are buried. We know kind of where, how businesses operate from a comms perspective. And because you need to know so much about comms, you also need to know how a business runs in order to do that successfully and to be able to properly like communicate across the business.
Yeah. I think that's probably where the transition from agency to in-house gets really interesting because I think once you're in-house, you really deeply learn a business. I think that was one of the things I missed at agency was like really getting under the hood of like what's going on in this business so that I can really effectively drive the communication strategy. And it's not to say you can't from agency, but I think being in-house, you sit in these meetings and particularly from our background, often they're very sales driven businesses, very focused on revenue, very focused on where the customers are at and market share and all these things that as a PR person is not necessarily in our wheelhouse, but we need to understand it in order to be good at comms. And so I think it's this really interesting kind of skill set that we have that we bring to a business around kind of advising on the external, but being heavily internal as well in terms of thinking about what it all means for the business.
Yeah, and the amount of communication that it takes to be able to get from point A to point B to successfully execute on some of the things that we do across comms. Like there are communities out there, like I'm a part of Mixing Board, which is an amazing community of like comms people and marketing people and brand people and professionals, but it's still very professional and locked up. I think what we'll try to do in this podcast is really think about get under the hood a little bit more and really kind of dig up what the real issues are and be a little bit more direct about that. Because I think the nature of comms people, because of how we have to present to executives and externally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And therefore, we don't like to talk shit. We don't like to lift under the hood because it's sort of ingrained in us to do the opposite in a way and be like a vault. And I think part of being a good comms person is that your executives know you're a vault, right? They can open up the kimono and say, hey, this is happening. What do you think is going to go down? How do we work through this? But then that translates into we all then don't really talk about our industry much. And even things like it's often us writing pieces behind the scenes for executives. And this is why this kind of extrovert introvert is like, we don't want to be front and center. We like being behind the scenes. We like doing that kind of strategic work. I don't want to be on stage. That's cool. That's not me. But I think this podcast is about us trying to be a little bit more open about some of the challenges of our industry, some of the things that, dealing with the media, dealing with executives, what happens when you're out on your own, like you are doing your consulting work, like what does that look like? So hopefully we'll open the kimono on the PR side, but but we'll do our best.
Also, let me just say, I think there's a huge opportunity for education around what is PR and comms. Like how many times and we use this as an example, and Duffy and I talk about this a lot. Like, our moms think that we talk to Oprah on the phone.
Yep.
Like, if we're, especially as a comms person coming in and trying to pitch business, a lot of the times, if they don't already have a comm structure in place, you have to explain to them what you do, and what they end up wanting from you is marketing activities.
Yeah.
So even the difference between comms and marketing,
And I think
that
that's a little bit
conversation.
harder because the lines are blurring, right? Between marketing, comms, content, social, what is external, what is internal. We've seen time and time again what happens internally is starting to go external. And so I think there is a confusion around where we sit, how we play, the value. And then I think there's that overall confusion of like the barbecue conversation of like, yeah, I work in comms or I work in PR. And I think most people's perception of that is like a publicist is probably like, what they imagine. Or, my parents, I think for a while thought I was a journalist. I don't know. I said I'd write stuff and they were like, oh, okay. And then I'd show them an article from one of my clients. They'd be like, so you wrote this? And it's like, no. But I think I've got there after 20 years. I think my dad is kind of almost there in terms of what we do. So
My
yeah.
parents still have no idea.
Yeah.
They have no clue. Yeah. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping. I'm just going to run through some of the highlights. We're going to do a highlight reel. We're going to do some bullets. So what you can expect from this podcast is each week we're going to chat through comms, business, media, and kind of the whole landscape and how all of that comes together. We're going to talk about a lot of the things that we notice, like whether it's comm strategies or crisis or things that are happening operationally that we're noticing across both like consulting landscapes and in-house or agency landscapes as well. And it's going to be the good and the bad. It's going to be totally honest, pretty blunt. We'll probably laugh our way through it so we don't cry.
Exactly.
And we'll have guests every couple of weeks. So not just PR people, we'll have lots of those on here, but also CEOs, we'll have marketing leaders, we'll have journalists on here to kind of talk about what that looks like in perspective of how they work with comms or what they hate about us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it'll be kind of nice because we'll have two parts of the world as well. And I think, as much as there are a lot of similarities in terms of comms and the work that we do sit in very different markets with very different media. And so hopefully we can add a little bit of, different global perspectives from two parts of the world as well.
Yep. So if you are a person in comms or you want to get into comms or you're a founder and executive that is interested in learning kind of what the whole structure looks like and what it's all about and how it can help your business, or if you're just like a comms veteran who needs somebody that sees you and hears your problems, this is going to be for you. And also, we want to hear from you. So we have an email. It's hello@smartandpublicpod.com. You can also find us in that same Smart and Public Pod on Instagram and TikTok, where we'll be kind of posting clips. You can reach out to us there. You can reach out to us on email, because essentially we're going to be talking about issues that happen with companies. If you work at that company, please let us know what your experience was like. You can write in anonymously. We'll
anonymous.
Yeah, we'll keep a secret. We'll put you in the vault and kind of share your experiences. Also, if we say things that are completely inaccurate, because sometimes I love to do a sweeping statement about things that are happening in the industry. Duffy knows this, and it drives her nuts. Correct me.
Yeah, we want to be corrected.
That.
If you think, if we say, hey, I would have done it this way and you have a different opinion, please let us know. We want to hear from other comms people. Yeah, just tell us all the juicy shit that you've got. And yeah, we will swear on this podcast, FYI.
Yeah.
Trigger warning.
I'm sure that your kids won't want to listen to this, but just in case.
Just in case you got little ones in the car and you're driving along, there will be swearing. I can't guarantee there won't be.
Perfect. Okay, Duffy, are you ready to dive into our topic for the day?
Let's do it.
Okay, it's one that's near and dear to our hearts. So we both have been, me within the last year and a half, Duffy within, what was it? You just said it.
8 weeks ago, I think, I've just finished my gardening leave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We both have been laid off just recently. And so just kind of looking at that and having a different perspective on things, like looking at businesses doing layoffs, media doing layoffs, like going back into the market, trying to figure out what your recruitment process is. Like for you, for the first time in 11 and a half years, you're interviewing.
Correct.
Do you like, do you
And
feel
believe
like
me, I don't interview well, is my new opinion. I feel like you have to know me to get the best of me, which is one of my challenges, right?
I feel like I interview very enthusiastically, and sometimes I feel like people mistake that for me being dumb.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like big smiles and kind of
Right
joking.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, just run naked into the bushes full force.
Mhm.
Like that's
Mhm.
that's kind of my approach, and I feel like that gets misinterpreted quite often. So,
Yeah. I feel like I talk a lot because that's my nervous tick is like I'll just keep talking and then it'll be fine and then that I think puts people off and then I don't think I'm great at like saying what I've done. And part of that is like, sometimes I just can't, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I've done this, I've done that. And so I think, like, a succinct, like, this is what I'm good at and these are my skills, it just doesn't come naturally. So,
no.
yeah, times interviewing for the first time in
But
11 years.
it's kind of like if you can't do teach kind of thing. So we teach people how to promote themselves and their brands and their companies all the time.
Yeah.
But when it comes back to a comms person, I don't know, write into our email if you guys agree.
Yeah. Please let me know if you have interview tips for me. That would be helpful. But yeah,
Please
I
tell
can't
us
be on
more.
myself. I'm not good at it. I don't like it.
Uh-uh.
And I need to get better at it. And I've done 1,000 interviews with people. And I know what I like when I interview people. And I think hopefully I'm very authentic. Nothing that I do is inauthentic. But I think I am someone that probably, I think I warm up over time. And we've talked about this. Like Katie and I used to have this joke that Katie's warm up front, and then if you lose her trust, you're out. And I'm probably cold up front, and you have to earn my trust. So we're kind of the opposite. But yeah, I think that's one of the challenges I have is like that kind of initial. I don't feel like I'm at my best.
Mm-hmm. And then you blend that with the entire interview process and what that is turned into today.
Yes.
It,
Well, that
it
is
just
what has shocked me actually.
Yeah.
Is like
Wait, hold on. Let
yeah.
me just say this. The
Please.
topic today is
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Welcome to the pod.
Hi. The topic today is everybody okay?
Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if
No.
everyone's okay. And we're going to cover like what that all means, like from different parts. So obviously we've launched right into interviewing and that thing. But and you've talked about layoffs. I think that's a really like it is happening everywhere. That's the other thing. And I think as much as it doesn't make it feel any better when you're an individual and that happens, I do think the market itself is so used to it at the moment, and there is this sense that when you tell people, I used to think when you tell people that people would be like, oh my god, like what did you do, what, and honestly
100%.
now people are like, oh yeah, yep, totally get it, so and so did that, so and so, and I'm seeing great talent, and I mean like incredible talent. And it's funny because I went through this with some team members last year and I had to be the one delivering that news to people, which is horrendous as a leader, because they have lives and families and all those things. And some of those people were some of the best PR people I've ever worked with. And it was, a company decision, you get handed down the decision and you've got to do it. So I know that that's the same in my case. And of course it still feels personal, but it is interesting that the culture around layoffs has changed. Tech particularly, but even in general.
Yeah. And when you go into interviews now, when you're kind of looking for your role, how do you position that you've been laid off? Like, are you straight up about it? Is it weird?
It's really interesting. Well, for a while I was on gardening leave, so I was still employed. And so I think in that scenario, I didn't address it because I was still technically employed. Now I'm unemployed. I don't work for, well, we can say the company, I don't work for Salesforce anymore. And so now the way I'm approaching it is my role was eliminated, which is true. I don't have any, I guess, hang-ups about that. I think, as I said, I think the culture has changed a little bit around that. I've said it to a couple of recruiters and they've just been like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. And have kind of moved on. Whether that's impacting it overall, I don't know. But it doesn't seem to be a conversation that they're unused to or that they're not hearing. And I think it's helped that I've heard from quite a few other senior people that I know when they found out my news. And I was shocked at how many of them are incredible talent, and then they've been made laid off. And so I'm kind of hearing this from a lot of people is like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. And when you reach a certain point in tech, like I was in a fairly senior role in a fairly small market, so I wasn't, I guess, I kind of knew it might be something that might happen at some point, because you reach a certain threshold, and the company's in a certain state, and what they're trying to do as a company is changing. So yeah, but that's how I've been addressing it, is just say my role was eliminated. I'm now looking for my next challenge, my next role.
Yeah. I think personally, though, kind of mentioning how long you're at the company, the role that you had, like the amount of investment that you put in heart and soul that you put into a company, maybe it's just like we as people who got laid off, we internalize that as bad because we gave so much to the business. And you genuinely cared. I genuinely cared about like how that company did, because I cared about the executives that I was looking after. I really loved my teammates. And I saw them grow around me. And, of course, in layoffs too, you think about like, why was it me and not this other person? And it's so hard when you're just a number on paper. And that's essentially what, from consulting. Now I have like my whole new perspective of like, there is no safety in a full-time role versus consulting. Like, because that's the biggest question that I always get is like, don't you feel it like you're always like you want the stability? Thank you, that was the word I was looking for. Like the security of a full-time role. And I'm like, well, I don't feel like I would be secure at a company right now. So
no, and I think the other, like I say this to people all the time, a lot of my friends are not in corporate, right? I have friends who are teachers, early childhood teachers. A lot of my family are nurses, there are benefits to corporate alongside this. So yes, at the moment, I don't think there is security, but at the same time, you've got high wages, you've got great benefits. So like, it's a payoff, right? Like what I was earning versus what some of my friends are earning, who are working probably 10 times harder as early childhood teachers and doing, I would say, a little bit more meaningful work. They, are not getting anywhere near what we get in corporate from a pay perspective. And so I try and get people to understand, like, it's a balance, and I've got to be aware of that entering into a corporate, especially big tech environment, is you get the good with the bad, right? And I'm incredibly grateful. Like I had a great run. I met my husband at Salesforce. I had my babies while I was at Salesforce. So like I've had a good run. I'm incredibly grateful. And it is what it is. You got to kind of, and yes, you have the month of like, why me? And I've done that. I'm through that. I'm through that phase. And now I'm in the phase of like, this is exciting for me. Like I get to actually think about what's next. And 11 and a half years, like I was young, man, I've aged. And so I don't know, like, I don't know what I want to do next. And it gives me the freedom to kind of have a think about that and what makes sense for me.
Would you, because I definitely considered this before going into consulting, but would you take on a different type of comms role, like go into internal comms or something like that under the umbrella?
Yeah, I think so. I also am like very open to other types of roles. Like I definitely would love to work a little bit more across marcom, so doing a bit of marketing as well. I feel like those worlds are converging very quickly. And so I think it's only helps us as comms people to have a good understanding of that. The other one that I see a lot of comms people, I don't know if you see this in the US, a lot of comms people going into chief of staff roles.
Yeah, 100%.
And doing really well at them. And so that's always something I've thought about as like, I'm super organized. I love thinking strategically, long-term, kind of getting into a business, getting under the hood of the operations of a business. How does that work? And then I think the comms background gives you this really good kind of foundation to be good at that role, because you're always dealing with different stakeholders. You're always managing different parts of the business and thinking about reputation and all of that stuff. So I don't know, that might be something else. I really don't know at the moment, but those are the things I'm playing around with.
Yeah, I honestly think that comms people, particularly if you are a comms person that has been doing it for like nearly 20 years, you are almost being like, this is a terrible word. Is groomed the right word to be able to say that? But like you're being groomed to be the chief of staff. Like I feel like it's the ideal next step for a lot of comms people, just because of how detail oriented, like I mentioned at the beginning, like you've got to be someone that's on it. You have to understand what the whole business looks like. Like you're not somebody in, no knock to salespeople, but like you're not in sales and you're only thinking about numbers and ACV and all those kinds of things. Like you're actually seeing the full picture. I just
Yeah.
think comms people make great chief of staffs.
Yeah, I think so. I've seen a few sort of transition into that role, and I've always thought it was really interesting. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. But I think the other thing, talking about is everyone okay? The other thing that's been like quite bizarre to me is the amount of like just standardized. There's a car alarm going off.
I love it. Just keep going. Pretend like
Yeah,
it's not
I
there.
mean, this is real life. I'm sitting in my home office. Um, the amount of standardized emails I get where you apply for a role. And
Mm.
I've had two instances. I applied for a role, I spoke to the internal recruiter. And I mean, again, this is like, am I just shit at this? But I thought we had a great conversation and kind of walked me through what the next steps would be, was really clear that like, this is where we would go next and this is what the next step would be. Thought that's where we were going. And then I kind of got this email that was just like, thanks, you're not a match. No personalization,
Yeah.
no feedback, nothing. And I'm sure in my past role, I'm sure that's happened to candidates who've come through for Salesforce too. But it just has been surprising to me. I got another one the other day where it wasn't even like, it was just the most unpersonalized standard email. I think that's kind of interesting that we're not even at this point bothering to personalize things for people.
There's a human element I think that has been lost, because
Yeah.
I do think that a lot of recruitment like processes has been broken for a long time. Either it
Yeah.
takes so long or you do so many interviews. But it feels particularly bad right now. Like
Yeah.
there is a girl on TikTok that I follow who has been looking for a job for like months. And what did she say? It was something like, this current role that she'd been interviewing for, she had 6 prior interviews, and then she spent 30 hours making a 45-minute presentation, and got like the just blanketed email back
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
Insane.
That's insane. Like that's just, and it's interesting because I remember, and this is again, I think there's some incredible recruiters out there in-house and from recruitment agencies. But I do think sometimes you get assigned a recruiter for a role who has never worked in comms, right? So they might be like supporting 4 business units, for example. And so they're also hiring for marketing, they're hiring for HR or, and then they're hiring your role as well. And I've often been like, oh, can I see like the CVs coming through? And they're like, oh, we've weeded out these 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I look at the 5 and I'm like, hang on, there's 2 in here that are really interesting to me. And it might be, one of them I remember was like, oh, they don't have tech experience. And this wasn't for a senior role. Like this was a fairly junior role. But they had really good like banking and a few other like areas where all of our customers are in as well. And I said to them, I just need to know they can do comms. I can teach them the tech part of it and, all of that sort of stuff for this role. I don't need them to necessarily be like deep in, oh, okay, And so sometimes I wonder like that first process is sometimes done by someone who isn't necessarily looking for what maybe the hiring manager is looking for or don't have a good sense of that. And I could be wrong, but I just remember that from when I was hiring is I'd have to like weed through the ones that got thrown out to be like just double checking that's, that we're not missing an opportunity to get someone different. Like, because diversity is a big thing too, right? It's like, if we only ever hire from a certain pool, whether that be a type of pool, in that case, it was just tech we were looking for. I was like, well, that means we're missing out on a whole bunch of talent that we might be able to
So
train.
true.
Yeah.
That's so true. So what advice would you give to people that are kind of in the market or kind of looking to change roles?
Well, it's funny you say this because, and I know it, but I was reminded of it yesterday. I went for a big walk with my husband and I was kind of talking about this, like this whole ghosting thing and the challenge at the moment. And he was like, I fundamentally believe your next role will come from your network. And he was talking about, even from a sales perspective, my husband's in sales, and he was saying, when it's kind of there's a lack of deals and a lack of pipeline, he's like, I'm always saying to my team, go and talk to your existing customers, because probably that's where the next thing is going to come from versus a net new build a relationship. There's no relationship there, that kind of thing. And so he was kind of saying spend more time in that space, which is so true. But again, it comes back to this extroverted introverted piece, is like, I don't know that I'm a great networker. Like I want to be, and I know I have a good network. I have amazing people I've worked with over many, many years, and there's some that are in my corner, for life. But it's like reaching out to those people, taking the leap to say, will you have a coffee with me? Like any of that sort of stuff. But I do think that is the way. I think most roles come from a network. And I know when I hire, usually I kind of know who I want, and they're probably in my network.
Yeah.
Or from my network.
I mean, the same goes for consulting. So like for me, I've been fortunate enough where I have not had to do any outreach for clients. It's all come through people being like, oh, there's an opportunity here, or hey, speak to this person. Can I do an introduction? And my network kind of bringing people into me. It's like this halo effect of the people that you know and kind of the impact that it has there. So that I've been really fortunate in that way. I think if you are considering consulting, there's a huge opportunity right now to go out and do that.
About that. Like, do you think that's kind of, because it's been interesting even since I've left my job, a few people have approached me to say, hey, would you do a little project here? Or hey, could you help me with this? And I kind of hadn't even thought about it really in terms of like that being an avenue. So tell us.
Well, businesses now are like they're tight on budgets, right? And they still need help. Teams are still stretched thin. And being a consultant and being able to come in without companies having to pay for your benefits and your healthcare and all of those things, you can do work when you're needed, and they don't have to pay you, and you're not working when you're not. You can come in and fill maternity leave gaps or parental leave gaps that are in the organization. There's so many ways that you can use a consultant, but as a consultant, if you're looking to reach out, you have to be able to identify where those opportunities lie, and you have to ask the question. So 2 of the clients that I've gone in, and when they have I've been recommended through a friend, but it's for a full-time role. And I just pitched to him, I was like, I can do this in 30 hours a month. Like here would be the rate for that. And they've ended up going with me when they were looking to do a full-time hire. So making sure that you complete a case and find the opportunities, particularly for the work that you really want to do. Like it's such a good opportunity for consulting right now, because businesses are ultimately looking to spend less money.
Yeah. I think you're right. It surprised me how much people are, but you're right. It's the climate as well, right? A lot of people don't have headcount. Headcount takes a lot of effort to get through for most companies, to try and convince someone that you need a full-time head. I think the challenge with that is as you say, identifying where are those opportunities. But again, I think just that whole idea of your network and really thinking about putting your name out there and kind of being a little bit more bolshy, which again is where I get uncomfortable, but it's definitely something I'm thinking about. And then it comes back to being smart in public, I have to figure out how to invoice someone, and I have to figure out how to get an ABN, which in Australia is registering your business. So there's stuff where I'm that's a whole new, which is exciting, right? If I was to do it, and I'm not there yet, but if I was to do it, that's a whole other area of learning, which you've had to go through in terms of I don't think PR people are naturally sort of business owners, right? And figuring out how to do that part of it and the finance side of it, to me, is a little bit scary.
Yeah, maybe we can do an episode just kind of on how you get all of that set up.
And that would be great. So let's do that so I can learn. Everybody else can.
Next time that we record, we'll just or we have a meeting, I'll just record it and we'll put it on here.
Amazing.
Okay, so if you're okay, let us know. If you're not okay, let us know.
Yeah,
we want to hear from you.
How's everyone else feeling about the layoffs?
I know.
And look, not everyone works in tech, but I think particularly in tech, it's been a rough 18 months, 2 years. And I don't see it slowing. I mean, it's maybe a little bit less drastic than it was, but I keep hearing about more and more. And so I think it's just a new world that we're in, that this is the reality right now. And yet all these tech companies are sprouting up and new companies, new AI companies, and they're hiring. Yeah. So it's just a really kind of a weird space to be in, I think.
I also think that comms people usually take the brunt of layoffs as well. So at least what I'm seeing on LinkedIn in particular, there's a lot of people out there in the comms world that are looking for jobs that have been let go.
Yeah, I think this is comes back to kind of something I'm super passionate about, which maybe we'll tackle another episode, but like why we're really important in a crisis, and like why in these times it's actually probably even more important to keep comms, and like where does comms sit at the leadership table? Because I think often you have a marketer, like you have a CMO sitting at that leadership table, but I think sometimes those CMOs have a different perspective than we would. And you know, I often push in the parts of the business that I've been in for comms to sit at that leadership table, to be able to have that full view of the business, think about the employee impact, think about the external impact, think about the internal impact, all of that stuff. And I think that's, with these layoffs, it is a bit scary, you know, that comms teams are being cut, because I think there's so much of a role a comms team can play in a challenging time for a business, if that is what they're experiencing.
Well, even think about what X, formerly known as Twitter, did, where they laid off their entire comms team and then they changed the name and didn't know how to address any of it. There's no brand positioning, like there was no messaging around kind of like why. And that also all of the
episode on X. If you work for X, if there's a comms person left,
oh my God.
If there is, you know, write in. Love to hear it.
Oh my God.
But yeah, that could be a whole episode. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I do think comms people, and other parts of the business too, which makes me sad sometimes. It's like certain functions get, you know, and hopefully businesses see value in all of the supporting functions. But I do think supporting functions where you're maybe not tied to a number, you know, although we know how much we contribute to the number, I think when you don't have a hard number attached to you, it can be tricky.
Yeah, and that's also an entire episode of like, how do you measure comms?
Has anyone figured it out yet?
We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. We've got a lot. There'll be so many.
Did you just say I still haven't figured it out?
No, of course we haven't. We don't do maths. No, I think we've got some way there, but I feel like it depends on what business you're in, how they see success. Like there's so many different factors. I think agencies are doing some interesting stuff around measurement. There's some interesting tools that are going around at the moment, way better than when I was at agency. But like in-house wise, I think it's still a little bit old school. It's like, well, what would be the ad equivalent? And it's like, okay, well, I can give you that, but that's not the same thing. And then it's like, where do you fit in the funnel? And, you know, where do we sit when it comes to pipe? Like some of this stuff is hard, right? It's like saying we all know it. Like when we read a really interesting article about a company, I'm going to Google that company, right?
Yeah.
So that organic search is driven, but how do you prove that someone read that article and then did that, right? So that's where it gets really tricky. So yeah, I don't think we've got it figured out. I think it's just there's parts of it we have figured out, but maybe not everything.
From like a consulting and a founder perspective, that's something that I see a lot in terms of measurement is they want to know like, well, what is the metric behind this? And this is a founder coming in and asking me when he has no comms program built out. And I'm like, well, your first metric is probably like, let's establish your messaging and
like
let's build your narrative. And you've got to do all these foundations. Sorry?
It's like an output metric versus an outcome metric,
yeah.
Right? Because they don't have anything.
Right,
so,
exactly.
But they want an outcome metric. And it's like, well, you haven't got any of the foundational pieces. But that's very hard to say to someone the metric is a piece of comms. It's a narrative doc or, you know, whatever it is. But that's the truth.
It's not what they want to hear, but it's how you get to the next stage. Yeah. Well, do you have any last thoughts, any key takeaways that you want to share? Otherwise, I'm going to ask you what you're looking at for the next week before we record again.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I feel like this has been a therapy session for me.
I also feel like we navigated through the topic very loosely.
Sure.
But
it's probably a good indication of what it's going to be like. We will have a topic each week. Will we kind of get everywhere with it? No, but that's okay.
Will we solve it? Never.
No.
So what are you excited about? What do you have coming up next week? What are you looking at?
Do you know what? It's interesting we talk about the network. Someone came through recently who's really interested in getting an in-house role in tech and wants to have a coffee with me. And so I'm doing that next week. But I always think these things come back around. Like this is someone who's more junior, who's looking for a little bit of advice and how to move in. But you never know where that's going to take you. So I'm doing that. I'm catching up with another friend. I love a walking meeting. Like it's my jam at the moment. So I'll meet someone for coffee and we go for a big walk around Sydney Harbour and kind of chat life and work. And she's in comms as well, but she's just had a baby, so she's off at the moment. So yeah, I kind of blend that kind of stuff together, and I'm just, the Olympics, I'm enjoying it. I don't know about you, but I'm enjoying it.
I literally have
so well. I'm deeply passionate about Australian sport. We probably will cover that at some point in for Australian sport. But yeah, like the 14-year-old Australian who won gold in the skateboarding, like rock
Love
on.
it.
And I don't think kids
Love
say
it.
rock on anymore, but like she's awesome.
I literally have U.S. Women's Olympics soccer Gold Cup match written down. So I'm all in on the Olympics, baby. I'm so excited about it.
I mean, that could be a whole other topic of like the brand explosion around the Olympics. And like, I don't know, I saw this funny one of like Qantas is now doing, I think it's Perth to Paris, and it's 17 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
And they flew all these journalists like business class to Paris.
Yeah.
And then like literally had the journalists filming in their pajamas, like Qantas pajamas on the plane. Like it was amazing. I mean, props to Qantas. I think it was a good idea because it was timed with the Olympics. It was going to Paris, but like seeing like these Channel 7, Sunrise, whoever it was, journalists in their like grey Qantas, or I think they were navy for Paris, but whatever, pajamas, being like, and so here's the cabin. I was like, God.
Okay, I've got an issue with this only because there's a few things that anyone would know if they've been on a flight where they've been offered pajamas and they're flying that long of a distance. One, I feel like I would be able to smell the journalist through the TV of like, that airplane smell? Yeah. Like you wake up from a flight and you're in those Qantas pajamas and it's not great.
It was also just trying to sell me on a 17-hour flight. I was like, that sounds horrendous. And they were like, you know what? It's better than it. I was like, come on, guys. It's not. Like business class or not.
Yeah.
17 hours is a long time. Like we used to fly to the US. You know this. You used to come back and forth. Your hubby's Australian. That 13, 14 from San Francisco, I'm at my limit. I'm like, get me off this plane. I smell.
Yeah.
Face is dry. I get nosebleeds on planes. Like, I'm not doing the 17-hour flight. Anyway, I just thought it was funny because it was packed with journalists. So I was also like, oh my God, like you put them all on the one plane. They're all together. They're filming. I felt sorry for the people in the background who were just trying to fly to Paris, and they were in their face mask. And I was like, I don't want to be on Channel 7 Sunrise while I'm in a flight. What are you doing? It was great.
Absolutely not. I also think about, just as the part 2 of that, is when you're in those pajamas, you're typically like not wearing underwear, and they're just such.
Do you not wear underwear with your pajamas?
No, absolutely not.
You've rocked my world. What do you mean? You go and get changed and you take your underwear off?
You bet your bottom dollar I do.
You've rocked my world.
It's too much. You already feel so dirty. I want as little clothes.
And you put your undies back on before you land?
Yeah. And then I change into my normal clothes.
Oh.
It's like I'm preserving them.
Okay, well now I need to know if everyone does this. So now
Please write in
and be like, do you keep your underwear on? I do.
Please. No, not me. I'll keep my bra on, but I'm not.
Oh, okay. See, I'd more likely take my bra off, but I have very small boobs, so they won't be flapping around.
They're not visible.
This has gone into a whole other direction.
Anyway, this is definitely the piece that I'm going to use for our social cut.
1,000%. Yeah. The PR story of the week is: do you or don't you wear underwear under your Qantas pajamas? I mean,
we need to know.
We need to solve it. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you have a topic that you want us to talk about, including underwear under your pajamas on a flight, please email us. Again, it's hello@smartandpublic.com. Oh my God.
It's
you guys,
what is
it's not it. It's hello@smartandpublicpod.com.
That's it.
Or reach out to us on Twitter. Nope. Reach out to us on Instagram @smartandpublicpod. Yes. Or TikTok at the same handle.
We're not hiding. We're there.
Find us on LinkedIn.
It's all good.
Slide into those DMs.
Hi. You guys. Yeah. Let us know what you think. This was, first time at it. But
All right.
yeah, I had fun.
Episode 1 in the books.
Woohoo!
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.